So somewhere along the line, someone has mentioned to you the idea of business systems, processes, SOPs, and you're taking in all these buzzwords. And all of a sudden you think to yourself, wait, what is a process? Yeah, that's a pretty common place to be at when you're starting to explore the world of business system stuff, because there is an endless amount of jargon that we keep using to define the same things, fancier and fancier terms. In this video, I want to break down what is a process and what are some synonyms we can use to remember the meaning of process so we can start to identify them in our day-to-day lives, in our normal day-to-day work. To explain process, I feel like one of the easiest ways to do so would be to look at something like this. This is a printer, or at least a GIF of a printer, and with this printer we have two defined sides. We have the input of paper, electricity, a human putting that paper and plugging in that electricity, and then we have the output. The output in this case is printed paper, right? Whatever we have, it is now printed. This machine right here that we see on the screen is turning an input into an output. And what is it that we can call this machine? Well, if we wanted to be literal, we could call this a printer, which you would be correct. We could also call it a machine, which would also be correct. But if we take a step back and go a bit theoretical, we could call this machine, this thing that's turning inputs into outputs, a process. Process is just a path to a defined result. When you turn one thing into another thing that you've defined, that journey between there of turning paper into printed paper, of turning ingredients into a cake, that is a process. One thing that I want to highlight for you about this definition of process is that the key things we need to have are a defined result. We need to know where we're trying to get, and we need to try to get there. We need to actually do things to get there. There is no requirement here that says this path needs to be perfect. It needs to be the straightest path, the most efficient path, nothing like that. Ooh, and if any of this feels a bit confusing, I do have a bonus training below this video that goes through all of this in a bit more detail, so check that out if you're feeling a bit stuck. All right, back to the video. To have a process, we just need to have a path and a known destination. The reason I want to highlight that is because so many times I hear people who are new to the process world view process as this other, this thing that some people can have, but I could never realistically achieve process in my business. But the fact is, you already have a process. All of us as human beings are quite process driven. And all I mean by that is we have ways of doing things. These things in our normal day-to-day lives outside of business are called habits. And habits are a way of doing things that you know you need to do. And those are the same thing as process. I'm not quite sure why the business world has decided that habit isn't fancy enough to be the term that we use. So we do call them process in a business or organizational standpoint, but they're functionally the same thing. Anything we do to go from inputs to a known output is a process. One example of this might be to turn clay into a pot. You know, the labor, the energy, the clay itself, the paint, the things we use, it's the creative process. For another example, we could look at the baking process of turning ingredients plus time and an oven into a cake. That is a process. Now, these are two physical processes that you can see taking shape, but this process mindset also applies very heavily to non-tangible things, intangible things. So for example, let's just say you are a copywriter and your job is to turn research and your skill into a sales page about a particular offer you're writing a sales page for. As a copywriter, you also have a process. Your writing process may not be tangible, but it's still you taking a path towards a known outcome. In this case, that outcome is a written sales page. Anytime we have a known destination and we're taking steps to get towards that destination, we are living out a process. All of these examples I've talked about here are process. Every time you go mow the lawn the certain way, that's a process. You take out the trash the certain way, that's a process. We eat, sleep, live, and breathe process already. And all I want to do in this video is help you recognize what you already have. Speaking of acknowledging our processes, if we can start finding process in the wild around us or in our organization, once we can find these processes, we can start improving them. We can look at how we write a sales page, how we take out the trash, how we make a pot, and we can start to make these processes more efficient, more stable. delegation friendly, hell, even automated. We can do all of these things once we actually acknowledge that the process exists. Now, speaking of acknowledging processes, I actually have a tool for you to help with that. So if you go down below this video in the description, I actually have a training where I walk through not just an expanded definition of process, because there's a little bit more I couldn't share here on YouTube, but also we have an exercise that's completely free. You take the training, you'll learn how to do it. And this exercise is all about defining what your organization actually does in detail, documenting what each process is so you can then create SOPs and automations and resources and delegation plans based on what your business actually does. So if you are learning about this process stuff in the interest of making your organization more systemized, and maybe you're not sure where to start, check out that training below. It is completely free, and on the page, if you just click on the link, you'll see some reviews of other people who've watched this free training. People seem to really like it. So check that out, and thanks so much for watching this quick YouTube video. Until next time, enjoy the process.